Millionaire abandons fiancée at altar, returns years later to discover her shocking secret. What would you do if the millionaire who broke your heart suddenly reappeared, claiming to have changed? This is the story of Claire, a resilient single mother of 4, whose life takes an unexpected turn when Richard, her ex-fiancé and a wealthy businessman, re-enters her world. Years ago, he left her at the altar, driven by fear and pride. Now he's determined to prove he deserves a place in her life and their children's. Will Claire give him a second chance, or will old wounds and new challenges tear them further apart? Stay with us to uncover a journey of love, redemption, and the unyielding strength of family. The warm glow of the late afternoon sun filtered through the tall, stained glass windows of the chapel, casting vibrant hues across the stone floor. Rows of elegantly dressed guests whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward the grand oak doors that remained stubbornly closed. At the front of the altar, a string quartet played a gentle melody, trying to ease the mounting tension in the room. In the bride's room, Claire stood before the mirror, adjusting her lace veil with trembling hands. Her chestnut hair was pinned into an elegant bun, and her ivory gown shimmered as she moved. Her best friend, Emily, hovered nearby, her face tight with worry as she tried to console Claire. "He loves you, Claire," Emily said softly, her voice laced with uncertainty. "He's probably just running late because he wants everything to be perfect." Claire forced a smile, though her green eyes betrayed her growing fear. "Richard isn't the type to be late," she whispered, glancing at the ornate clock on the wall. Each tick seemed louder than the last, echoing in her mind like a countdown to disaster. The priest appeared at the doorway, his expression grave. Claire's heart sank. "I'm sorry, Miss Claire," he began hesitantly. "We've received word that Richard isn't coming." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the vanity table to steady herself. The room seemed to close in around her, the soft hum of conversation outside replaced by a deafening silence. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice cracking. "There must be some mistake." Ignoring Emily's pleas to stay, Claire ran out of the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she burst into the sanctuary, her veil streaming behind her like a ghostly shadow. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled out into the parking lot, scanning for Richard's familiar face or car. But he wasn't there. Claire's sobs filled the crisp air as she sank onto the curb, her white gown pooling around her like a discarded dream. Across the lot, a sleek black car idled quietly. Inside, Richard sat gripping his phone, his jaw tight and his knuckles white. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "This marriage isn't right for you, Richard. Think of your future. Think of your career." He had believed her. He'd let her fear-mongering convince him that marrying Claire would ruin him. But now, watching her crumble from the safety of his car, guilt clawed at him. He wanted to step out, to apologize, to tell her the truth. But he couldn't find the courage. So he stayed, hidden in the shadows of his own cowardice. Claire wiped her tears and drew in a shaky breath. She stood, her hands trembling but her eyes steely with resolve. "I won't let him or anyone else make me feel like this again," she whispered. Lifting her chin, she turned away from the church, her steps unsteady but determined. The next morning, Claire packed her belongings into a single suitcase. The small apartment she had shared with Richard felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. She left no note, no explanation. She simply boarded a bus bound for anywhere but here, the city she once called home, now a prison she needed to escape. Claire's journey led her to a quiet coastal town, its salty breeze and crashing waves offering a strange sense of solace. She rented a modest room in a weathered boarding house and found work at a small cafe that overlooked the sea. The days were long and grueling, but they kept her mind occupied. At night, however, the weight of her humiliation and heartbreak returned, pressing down on her like a suffocating fog. Weeks turned into months, and Claire began to rebuild her life. The townspeople admired her resilience, though they didn't know the depth of her pain. She smiled at customers, greeted neighbors, and carried on as if she wasn't holding together the shattered pieces of herself. One morning, Claire woke feeling strangely unwell. The queasiness that gripped her didn't fade with the morning sun. At first, she blamed it on stress and exhaustion, but a gnawing suspicion led her to the pharmacy. That evening, she sat in the tiny bathroom of her apartment, clutching a pregnancy test with shaking hands. 2 lines. Positive. Claire stared at the result, her heart pounding. Fear and joy collided within her. She was going to have a baby, no, for babies, as she would soon learn. The idea of raising a child alone was daunting enough, but quadruplets? She pressed her hand to her stomach, a small, hesitant smile breaking through her tears. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. "This is my second chance," she whispered to herself, the words steadying her trembling resolve. "I'll give them everything I never had." The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Claire worked longer hours at the cafe, saving every penny she could. Her once modest room gave way to a small but cozy home on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and soon, it would be their sanctuary. As her pregnancy progressed, Claire became a local inspiration. Her strength and determination, even while caring for children, captivated everyone around her. Despite her growing belly and the challenges it brought, she never complained. She spent her evenings assembling cribs and folding tiny clothes, her heart swelling with anticipation and love. But the road wasn't without its struggles. There were nights when the fear of the unknown kept her awake, tears soaking her pillow. What if she wasn't enough? What if Richard found out and tried to take them from her? But every doubt was met with a fierce determination. "They're my children," she would remind herself, "and I'll fight for them with everything I have." Claire's journey as a mother began the moment her children were born. The delivery was complicated, but when she held each of her boys for the first time, Lucas, with his curious eyes, Noah, soft-spoken and sweet, Liam, the comedian even as a baby, and Oliver, the quiet observer, she felt a love so profound it erased any lingering doubts. "This is my family," she whispered, cradling them close, "and no one will take them from me." But life had other plans. Just when Claire thought she had finally found peace, fate brought her face to face with the man she had tried so hard to forget. The past she thought she'd left behind was about to collide with the future she had built. A future she was determined to protect, no matter the cost. The morning air was crisp and bright as Claire watched her 4 boys tumble across the park's grassy field, their laughter ringing out like music against the backdrop of the serene coastal town. Lucas, the most curious of the group, was leading his brothers in an impromptu game of tag. Liam, true to his playful nature, took every opportunity to trip the others, cackling with glee when they protested. Noah sat on the sidelines with a sketchpad, carefully drawing the scene, while Oliver, ever the observer, studied the mechanics of a nearby swing set. Claire smiled from her seat on the park bench, her heart swelling with pride and contentment. These moments were what she lived for, the simplicity of her boys' joy, the peaceful rhythm of their lives. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, she carried the constant weight of her responsibilities and the fear of what might come if the delicate balance she had built was ever disrupted. She didn't expect that disruption to come so soon. As she glanced up from her book, Claire's breath caught in her throat. Across the park, a figure sat on a bench, staring directly at her. Tall, with sharp features and dark, wavy hair, the man looked strikingly familiar. Claire's chest tightened as recognition dawned. Richard. The years had been kind to him. Dressed in a tailored jacket, his polished appearance contrasted starkly with the casual warmth of the small-town scene. His gaze shifted from her to the boys, and his expression softened, though confusion and hesitation flickered in his eyes. Claire followed his line of sight and felt her stomach twist. It was undeniable. The boys bore his features, from Lucas's determined set of his jaw to Oliver's piercing gray eyes. Her instinct screamed to leave, to gather her boys and run before Richard could approach, but her body betrayed her. She remained frozen, her pulse thundering in her ears as Richard stood and walked toward her. "Claire." His voice was low and hesitant, as though he didn't trust himself to say her name aloud. She swallowed hard, rising to her feet. "Richard," she replied, her tone clipped. "What are you doing here?" His eyes darted toward the boys, then back to her. "I didn't know you lived here. I was passing through for business, and I didn't expect to see you." "Neither did I," Claire said, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. "What do you want?" Richard hesitated, glancing at the boys again. "Are they?" He trailed off, his voice faltering. Claire's jaw tightened. She had imagined this moment many times, rehearsing every possible response. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the way her heart clenched at his question. "They're mine," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. Richard's expression shifted, a mixture of shock and realization washing over him. "They're mine too, aren't they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You don't get to claim them now, Richard. Not after what you did." Richard stepped closer, his brows furrowing with regret. "I know I hurt you, Claire. I know I made mistakes, but I had no idea." "No idea?" Claire interrupted, her voice rising. "You left me at the altar, Richard. You didn't care what happened to me. And now you think you can just show up and be a part of their lives." The boys' laughter faded as they turned to watch the confrontation, their curious eyes darting between Claire and Richard. Lucas, ever the bold one, approached first, tugging on Claire's skirt. "Mom, who's this man?" Claire knelt down, placing a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. "Lucas, sweetheart, why don't you go play with your brothers? Mommy will be there in a minute." Lucas frowned but nodded, retreating reluctantly. Richard's eyes followed him, his gaze lingering on each boy as they returned to their game. When he looked back at Claire, his expression was filled with quiet desperation. "I need to know them, Claire," he said. "Please, they deserve to know their father." Claire's anger flared. "A father? Do you know what being a father means, Richard? It's late nights and early mornings, the sacrifice and love and showing up every single day. You haven't earned the right to call yourself their father." Richard flinched at her words but didn't back down. "I made a mistake, a terrible one, but I want to make it right. I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now. Let me prove it." Claire's eyes narrowed. "And what happens when you get scared again, Richard? When things get hard? Are you just going to walk away like you did before?" Richard's jaw tightened, his guilt evident. "I'm not that man anymore. I've changed." The air between them was heavy with unspoken pain and unhealed wounds. Claire took a shaky breath, her resolve hardening. "You can't just waltz back into their lives and expect everything to be okay. They don't even know you exist. And I'll be damned if I let you hurt them the way you hurt me." Richard's shoulders sagged, the weight of her words settling over him. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the enormity of what he had lost, and what he stood to lose again. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Claire, but I want to be a part of their lives. Please." Before Claire could respond, a voice called out, "Mommy!" It was Oliver, holding up a paper airplane triumphantly. "Look what I made." Claire forced a smile, waving to him. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'll be there in a minute." As Oliver ran back to his brothers, Claire turned to Richard, her voice cold and firm. "You want to prove yourself? Fine. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. Those boys are my entire world, and I won't let you or anyone else hurt them." Richard nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Claire watched as he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the distance. She felt the familiar ache of old wounds reopening, but she couldn't afford to dwell on them now. Her boys needed her strength, and she vowed to protect them from whatever storm lay ahead, even if it was a storm named Richard. Claire spent the next few days in a fog of anxiety, her thoughts circling back to Richard's unexpected appearance. She had managed to protect her boys from the truth for 5 years, but his sudden re-entry into their lives had thrown everything into chaos. His plea to be part of their lives echoed in her mind, a mixture of sincerity and regret that she struggled to ignore. One afternoon, as the boys played in the backyard, Claire heard a knock at the door. Her stomach tightened as she opened it to find Richard standing on her porch. He held a paper bag in one hand and a hesitant smile on his face. "What do you want now, Richard?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I brought coffee," he said, holding up the bag like a peace offering. "I thought maybe we could talk. I don't want to argue, Claire. I just want to understand." Claire sighed, stepping aside to let him in. She guided him to the small kitchen table, its surface cluttered with coloring books and half-empty juice boxes. Richard took a seat, his gaze darting around the modest home. "You've built a good life for them," he said softly. "It's clear how much you love them." Claire sat across from him, her expression guarded. "I didn't have a choice. I had to step up when you didn't." Richard nodded, his guilt evident. "I know I let you down, Claire. I've spent the last 5 years trying to figure out how to make up for it. Seeing them at the park, it made me realize how much I've missed. I don't want to miss any more." Claire studied him, searching for any sign of insincerity. "It's not that simple. You can't just decide you want to be a father now. They don't know you, Richard. They don't even know about you." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "Then let me start from scratch. Let me earn their trust and yours. I'll do whatever it takes." Claire hesitated, her heart warring with her instincts. She had spent years shielding her boys from the pain of Richard's absence, but now, his determination forced her to reconsider. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she admitted, "but for their sake I'll give you a chance. One chance." Relief washed over Richard's face. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise I won't let you down." The next weekend, Richard arrived early at Claire's house, a box of art supplies in hand. He had spent days thinking of ways to connect with the boys, and when Claire mentioned Noah's love for drawing, he seized the opportunity. Noah eyed the box warily as Richard knelt beside him. "I heard you like to draw," Richard said, pulling out a set of colored pencils. "Think you could teach me a thing or two?" Noah glanced at Claire, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, he reached for the pencils, his small hand brushing against Richard's. "What should we draw?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard smiled. "How about we draw something together? You can teach me how to do it right." As the two began sketching, the other boys grew curious. Lucas joined first, peppering Richard with questions about his favorite superheroes. Liam followed, challenging Richard to a game of tag in the yard. Even Oliver, the most reserved of the group, eventually warmed up to him, watching intently as Richard helped Noah perfect his shading. Claire observed from the kitchen window, her heart a mix of emotions. She couldn't deny the joy on her sons' faces or the way Richard seemed to genuinely care for them, but her lingering doubts kept her guard firmly in place. Weeks turned into months, and Richard's presence became a regular part of their lives. He attended the boys' soccer games, helped with homework, and even learned to bake cookies for their school fundraiser. His efforts didn't go unnoticed, and slowly, the boys began to refer to him as Dad. For Claire, the transition was harder. While she appreciated Richard's commitment, she couldn't shake the fear that it was temporary, that he would leave again when things got tough. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, she finally voiced her concerns. "Why now, Richard?" she asked, scrubbing at a stubborn stain on the counter. "Why did it take you 5 years to come back?" Richard paused, the plate in his hand forgotten. "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "I let my fears and my mother's influence control me. I thought walking away would be easier, but it wasn't. It's haunted me every day since." Claire turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "And how do I know you won't walk away again?" "You don't," Richard said honestly. "All I can do is prove to you, every day, that I'm here to stay." As time passed, Claire began to see glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. Richard's patience and kindness with the boys, his willingness to take responsibility for his mistakes, and his steady presence in their lives started to chip away at her walls. One day, As they watched the boys build a fort in the backyard, Richard turned to her. "Thank you for giving me this chance," he said. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I'm worthy of it." Claire's gaze softened, though she remained cautious. "This isn't just about me, Richard. It's about them. They deserve a father who's all in no matter what." "You have my word," he said, his voice resolute. That evening, as Claire tucked the boys into bed, Lucas looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mom, do you think Dad will stay forever?" Claire's throat tightened, and she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "I think he's trying very hard to stay, sweetheart." "Good," Lucas said with a sleepy smile, "because I like having him here." As she turned out the light, Claire couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that their fractured family could finally begin to heal. But as Claire closed the door, a shadow of doubt lingered in her mind. Could she truly trust Richard to keep his promises? Only time would tell. For now, she would hold onto the fragile peace they had found, one day at a time. Claire's story is one of resilience, love, and forgiveness. Despite the immense challenges she faced as a single mother, she never wavered in her dedication to her children. Her journey with Richard, from betrayal to reconciliation, is a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring strength of family. Through hard work and unwavering determination, Claire built a life of stability and love for her 4 sons, proving that even in the face of adversity, hope and perseverance can lead to something beautiful. Richard's transformation from a man consumed by fear and doubt to a devoted father underscores an essential truth. Change is possible when one is willing to confront their mistakes and take responsibility for their actions. This story reminds us that forgiveness is not an easy path, but it is a path worth taking when trust is rebuilt through genuine effort. Claire's choice to give Richard a chance wasn't just for herself. It was for the well-being of her children, a decision that required immense courage and faith. In the end, it wasn't about erasing the past but creating a new future, one where love and growth prevailed. Now, let's reflect together. What did you think about Claire's decision to give Richard a second chance? Would you have made the same choice? Or do you think she should have taken a different path? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Hit the notification bell so you'll never miss an update. Let's play a little game before you go. If you believe in the power of forgiveness and the importance of second chances, type "family first" in the comments. Let's celebrate the beauty of love, resilience, and redemption together. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay tuned for more stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of the incredible power of the human spirit. See you in the next story.